Get ready to find your recipe for a successful real estate lifestyle from America's top expert here at Greenlight REI with your host, Lance Edwards.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this session of Greenlight REI, where we teach you the successful real estate lifestyle. And we've got a really extra special guest for today. It's on topic. Of course, we're a real estate podcast. It's indirectly related to real estate. I'm going to make the connection here in a minute, but it's about water management. Particularly in the state of Florida. Many of you may not be aware, I moved back to Florida just about a year and a half ago. I live on the beach here in Florida, where I was born and raised. And this summer, what you don't know is we had dead porpoises and dead sea turtles rolling up on my beach due to something called red tide and blue-green algae and algae. And our guests will be talking about that. And it has got me not only angry, but very active and want to understand, like many Floridians, about what's causing this and how do we stop this. And last week, my wife here on the island where we live heard our guest speaker speak on this topic. And when she told me about it that afternoon, I was so excited because it was the first person I'd heard speak that actually made sense to me. It actually sounds reasonable about what's going on, what the problem is. And so I immediately invited him to speak here on the podcast, and he generously accepted. Of course, this is a real estate show, but I will tell you, this is a real estate topic because I believe the biggest impact on real estate values in the state of Florida and elsewhere is going to be water management if we don't get on top of this. In fact, I predict an economic red tide if we don't get on top of this, and it's not going to be just limited to Florida. But with that, my guest is Mr. Garrett Stuart. He's an expert on marine biology and algae, and he's a very practical, mattered man when you hear him speak. He's the CEO of the Eco Preservation Project. And with that, Garrett, welcome to Greenlight REI. It's actually a pleasure to have you here today, sir.
Oh, thank you, Lance. Thank you. Appreciate being here. I've always got a lot of support from realtors. In fact, the woman who runs this business is a realtor. So it all makes sense and it gets connected in the end of why we should be concerned with this.
It's all connected. That's exactly the point. That's perfect. Garrett, real quick, you've got really great set of credentials. Would you mind sharing with everyone what's your background and how did you get involved with, quote, red tide and the algae blooms we have here?
Yeah. I haven't really been working on red tide a whole lot of my life. In fact, I'm originally a Kansas native, and I was a wildlife biologist over there. Went to school, studied algae at Pitt State University under Dr. James Dawson, and one of 54 algae scientists. I kind of like to say that there's 53 in me, but it was a pretty fun topic to learn. Now, I was actually watching Blue Planet and working in agriculture. After being a wildlife biologist when the recession hit us back in 2008, 2009, people were not paying me to save a raccoon and a possum anymore. However, there were a lot of people offering to pay me to save their corn and their soybeans. So I went into agriculture. It's somebody's job to recommend chemicals and fertilizer. So I figured that'd be an excellent job for a guy they call Captain Planet, me. So I started learning these things. That way I could implement the best agricultural techniques. After about a year, I became a crop consultant and a precision ag specialist, running my own division with the company. And I caught the show Blue Planet, a documentary about our oceans and how they're hurting and suffering. And the more I learned about coral bleaching and how it's actually an algae problem that becomes a coral problem, the more I realized that I'd probably be of some great help. So I moved to the Florida Keys, and I started working pretty hard to save our reefs. And I found myself working the hardest with educational outreaches. I'm an excellent scientist, but I'm an even better storyteller when it comes to just explaining something to anybody. I love what Einstein said. He said, if you can't explain something simply enough, it means that you don't understand it. And I see that the lack of understanding is a real problem here on planet Earth. My biggest problem isn't pollution. It's actually apathy of the pollution. People that are just unaware. So after living in the Florida Keys, I was actually just sitting in my organic papaya garden one day off work. Somebody tagged me in a video of the discharges coming out of Lake O, green with cyanobacteria. And they tagged me and said, Captain Planet, can you help these people? And I started seeing what they were going through, so I made a video trying to explain to them as an algae scientist what they are seeing. And it got pretty popular because I said, as an algae scientist, I'll tell you, Florida does not have an algae problem. It has a nutrient pollution problem. And I'd woken up and that video had been shared a couple thousand times and had quite a bit of people asking me questions. The more and more people asked me, the more and more I started coming up from the Keys. And I was up there so often, I only found myself at home maybe a couple days a month. So I decided to move closer to the problem. This isn't something that's just going to go away overnight. Therefore, I'm not going away overnight either. Even though I've worked a lot of my life to save the third largest reef on the planet, the barrier reef there in the Atlantic. What we know from going from Fort Lauderdale clear down to the dry Tortugas, that will eventually die as well if we keep treating our water this way. We choke out the Everglades, and that reef is needed for 9,000 years, the water flow from that Everglades of fresh water to trickle over that reef as a filtering system. We've choked that off. And then at the same time, we fertilize our water with pollutions, and we don't have too much longer. That reef is already over half dead now, just from the last few years. It's pretty important to me, and it's pretty important to everyone that they all understand that that's really how the earth ticks, is coral reefs. They're responsible for 25% of the ocean species, and you can't take 25% of a circle away and still have a circle. By 2050, a lot of scientists believe that coral reefs will become extinct. It's the same year that they're expecting plastic to be more prevalent in our ocean than fish. So I figured it's pretty important that I have to do something. The problem is apathy when you look at it. It's a lack of education.
Well, that's why it's so important to have you here. And so let me start off with some questions. I know we got a lot of topics we want to cover here, but I'm throwing out this term red tide, and I threw out this term blue-green algae. So let's start there, Garrett. What is red tide? What is blue-green algae?
Well, the blue-green algae is actually not even an algae at all. You might have heard the word cyanobacteria as well.
Yep.
So cyanobacteria is actually what it is. It's several organisms, several types of bacteria. Now, we often call this blue-green algae because when the cyanobacteria blooms to epic proportions, it gives off that green and then later a blue pigmentation on the top of the water. So we commonly refer to a lot of algae as blue-green algae, but they're actually a bacteria. Versus red tide is a dinoflagellate called K. brevis. It's a type of algae that occurs out in the Gulf of Mexico. We have a lot of history of that always being natural. And in fact, both are natural. But I like to tell people as well, when they tell me that, red tides existed before fertilizer, Captain Planet, how do you explain that? Well, the same way that Native Americans grew corn before fertilizer, but when you start dumping mosaic phosphate all over it, it sure does grow a lot more, doesn't it? So it's that same concept. Really what's going on is when we see algae blooms all over in histories, whether we're talking about Lake Erie, it's a direct correlation of human activity most times. Now, this year as well, not just in Florida, but if you look worldwide, we've had algae problems in Japan, Oregon, everywhere. In fact, my swimming lake back in Kansas, Melbourne Lake, that I used to swim at as a kid, was closed for a month or so in the summer due to cyanobacteria blooms. So we need to realize, too, climate change is real. If you believe in dinosaurs, then you need to keep your hand up when they say, do you believe in climate change? Because it's the same thing, really. That's why dinosaurs can't survive through an ice age. They're cold-blooded. They survive through a tropical age. We know that the Earth's a little bit older than one tropical age and one ice age. It works like a clock. However, humans are speeding up that clock quite a bit. In fact, a lot of scientists suggest that we have sped up global warming by about 700 to 900 years so far. Now, when you have old school farming practices and illegitimate yard practices as far as what we're putting in our homes of landscaping, those start to add up like a fuel on the fire when we're talking about climate change. So imagine people hiding trash in a lake, in different ponds, and then everybody experiences a drought. The people who've been polluting that water with trash are going to be a little bit more noticeable in that drought because you're going to see it. It's the same way with Florida right now. We've treated our water pretty bad for a pretty long time, and now it's exposing a lot of our pollutants. But you also have to think, when you talk about pollution, nutrient pollution in regards to red tide and then affecting it, let's not forget the Mississippi River, guys. So look at the correlation between every time it floods north of the Mississippi up there on mainland and how a month or two later we have an epic red tide, because all that pollution flows down from the Mississippi River. About a third of the country flows through the Mississippi River. So it's not just the Floridian problem. This is going to take a conscious shift of not just America, but the entire world. It's not exactly that hard, though, when you explain to yourself that there is no business that thrives on a crashing ecosystem. Not one, unless you believe in the devil. So when we think about companies like Mosaic and Monsanto that we call the devil, we also need to know that, hey, that they've got to make money too. But we have to realize that sometimes just money isn't the answer in those ways. And when we talk about a phosphate problem in this state, so nutrients, for example, plants take vitamins. Plants do not eat chili dogs like we do, but they drink water and they take vitamins like we do. We call it fertilizer. So imagine mom and dad did not give us 25 Flintstone vitamins a day, right? Because then that nutrition would become pollution and make us sick. Well, the plants don't necessarily operate that way in Florida as far as getting sick, because the soil is made of sand. So it leaches, meaning those nutrients just fall down into the soil, go into our water tables, into our water. So all these nitrates and phosphates that we use in our yards that aren't needed. As a former crop consultant and precision ag specialist, take some soil samples and check it out. You do not need phosphate in Florida. A good reason you can tell that is because the largest phosphate in the entire world is Florida. In fact, we mine more phosphate in Florida than anywhere else on the planet. And yet we're experiencing phosphate problems, nitrate problems. And people will say that that's the application of fertilizer and not the mining and the producing of it. To me, it's a little bit of common sense. So to break this down in a nutshell, as far as why we are experiencing blooms that have happened in the past of epic proportions this year, Irma had a lot to do with it. So think about the way that we work our yards and work our farms and live our lives. There's a lot of nutrients and pollution involved. So a lot of our development, for example, development is waterproof. Name inside that humans make that's not waterproof. Everything that's waterproof has runoff, so it doesn't get soaked into that ground. So we have a lot of runoff.
Hey, Garrett, hang on 1 second. I just lost your signal. Are you there?
Yep.
Okay. So now I hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of nutrients, and those nutrients, the nitrates and phosphates, tend to settle at the bottom of our waterways. So imagine a lake like Lake Okeechobee that's 720 square miles, I think, but the average depth is only 8 feet. So it's very, very shallow. All these nitrates and phosphates for years settling on the bottom. Well, when Irma skipped across, it stirred up the water column. And where the algae is already natural, but not noticeable, it's at the top where the sunlight is, because algae needs sunlight, warmth, and it also needs nutrients. Sunlight is not the limiting factor. Nutrition is. So when those nutrients got suspended up and down into the water column, it became a food source for the algae, and they eat it. So it's just like putting Miracle-Gro on your tomato plant and then complaining about the number of tomatoes being produced, being tired of picking tomatoes. Well, stop fertilizing your tomato plant. So imagine all this cyanobacteria blooms. But Lake Okeechobee, we've got a problem with that old lake that shouldn't have ever even been built into a reservoir.
Oh, Garrett, I lost you again. Hold on, Garrett. I lost you again. Garrett, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, now I got you back. You were talking about making Lake into a reservoir. Yeah. Well, go ahead. We got you now. We got you. We're talking about making Lake
into a reservoir. The reason why it's a problem is because we are looking at a situation just like Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. That dike is slowly giving out, so we can't let that water be too high. It has to go somewhere. And because of big sugar, pollution from sugar fields, and also because the Mississippi tribe has the right to have clean water, we can't let that water flow south. Also, there are endangered species like the Cape sparrow and the Everglades that I think we need to be looking around, because as we choke that reef out, we're going to lose 25% of the ocean species. So I don't understand how one species of sparrow is more important than 25% of the species in the ocean. That seems to me that it's a pretty convenient situation for sugar. Now, what we need to do is let that water get clear and clean so we can send it south, and we won't break that treaty with the Mississippi tribe. Instead, we send that water west to the Caloosahatchee and east to the St. Lucie, because we don't want that dike to overgo. And when I say we, I say the state, not like I'm pulling those locks, guys. So we dump that polluted water into our oceans instead of letting the Everglades filter it like it should. Now, when we put that polluted water, think about it's a freshwater bacteria that goes into salt water. Well, it dies when it hits the salt water. Gandalf from Lord of the Rings does not come out of the sky and make all the nitrates and phosphates that the cyanobacteria ate and make them disappear. When that animal dies, it's readily available for anything else that wants to eat it. And K. brevis, the red tide's right there waiting. But we also have sewage problems, for example. If you look at our septic tanks and how that works, it's right in the same line as our water, our groundwater. So we have a lot of pollution from poop. If you look at our water samples, it looks like we don't even use toilets, like we just walk out to the beach and poop. So we have development issues. Now, that leads me to believe that instead of keep building more, let's manage what we have. And I'm not a businessman, and I'm certainly not in the realty business, but it would be common sense to me to think that if you started limiting the amount of development, that wouldn't those buildings that already exist become worth more money, Lance?
That's correct.
So wouldn't that be in our best interest? And then think of landscaping, where you've got states like the state of Nevada that will give you up to a $300,000 incentive for property to take out your sod and implement eco landscaping. That makes me and you want to get to Home Depot on Sundays, right? And if you think of this, if we're using eco landscaping, that is Florida native plants. Are we driving up to Jersey to get Florida native plants? No, Florida native plants grow in Florida. So that's even more business. Those guys, as well as the landscaping guys, they're going out taking their families to dinner, getting a fender bender on the way. Boom, they get some money to the auto shop. And that's how this gravy train works in the state of Florida. We run on tourism. The sad fact of it is, Lance, 34% of the aquifer is for public consumption. And that's not just for me and you, that's for our children and our grandchildren and their grandchildren. Yet 49% of that aquifer gets to go to agricultural crop production. Now, that scares me, because they tell you that agriculture is a very big part of the Florida revenue. But we've been lied to. Look at your paperwork. It's less than 1% of Florida's avenue is agriculture, not including cattle. I'm talking crop production. So how is less than 1% worth more than our leading revenue? Tourism. Next would be fishing. When we're supporting things like mining, where phosphate mining supports 6,000 jobs, so we're getting people rich, but we're getting the wrong people rich. We're not getting rich off of it. 70% of the phosphate used in America, Lance, comes right here in Central Florida, right north of Lake Okeechobee from Bone Valley.
Yep.
25% of the world's phosphate comes from Florida. But yet we're not getting rich off the world eating from our backyard. In fact, we're losing our way of life from it. Our pollution is literally causing our oceans to die. That's why we've never seen porpoise wash up and turtles wash up like this. We have nutrient pollution, and our nutrient-rich shorelines are feeding algae that are already growing under circumstances with climate change. So we're literally putting them in a greenhouse and then making sure we squirt them full of Miracle-Gro.
So let me ask you this, because that's the best explanation I've heard of anyone. And I'm going to follow up on something here, because when I grew up as a kid, and you've answered a lot of this, we'd have outbreaks of red tide for a week or so, and some fish would die, and it'd be stinky for a week or so. Now we're right now in 12 months into a bloom here offshore. We got mammals dying now. So how does, in whatever we're calling it, first of all, do you call this red tide? What do you call it? Supercharged red tide? Because it's killing porpoises. Where it didn't used to do this before.
I call this the cut of 1,000 wounds, Lance. Because people know we have a problem now that they can smell it and see it. However, what if I told you that for the last decade, we've been losing an average of 200 species a day to extinction? In fact, our latest research suggests that we could lose up to 50% of life on Earth to extinction in as little as 100 years at the route that we're going. Yet nobody's talking about it, when in fact, we have created an extinction period that is killing off animals, plants, 5 times faster than when the dinosaurs went extinct. That's the reality. But now that it's in our backyard and we smell it, we want answers. But the reality of it is, you can't tell me that climate change and human impacts don't have a cause and effect on this, because it's having a cause and effect on the entire planet. We have been looking at these oceans as going, tasty, hunting tuna to near extinction, when tuna doesn't even taste that great to begin with. All it takes is just supporting sustainable fishing, eating grouper, hogfish, yellowtail snapper, something that's caught with a fishing line or a spear instead of fishing with a net. It's just time that we take a little conscious shift on business. To me, when I look at American business, I truly think that we're failing. I truly feel that. When a toaster costs $14.99, are you telling me that toasting your bread every morning, making breakfast, is only worth $15? No, it's only worth $14.99 because you're making money off the mining of the materials, and you've lost pride in the product. 30 years ago, you didn't see plastic in the ocean because you used plastic to fix things. When that toaster broke, you snuck it down to Ted, the guy that fixes toasters for a living. And Ted doesn't exist anymore because that toaster is not made with breakaway parts. It's not made to be repaired. It's made to be replaced at a convenient cost of $14.99. That's why they're stacking up in my oceans. That's failure to me. When I look and I see that a Coke can is worth 5 cents but a plastic Coke bottle is worth nothing. And you hear that we have 8 pieces of microplastics versus plankton in our ocean already. We have that big of an ocean plastic problem. The problem is that we miss the whole idea that it's worth money. Whether we use ocean plastics as a government incentive for businesses or simply by public demand. You cannot tell me that if 5,000 people wrote to Lego and said, hey, Lego, you could be cool again if you started making toys out of melted ocean plastic instead of virgin plastic. In fact, I think every adult's got a special spot in his heart for Legos. I don't know about you, Lance, but I sure would love a Aquaman Lego set made out of ocean plastics just to sit there and put up on my kitchen cabinet and show that I support that kind of a lifestyle. It takes a conscious decision. You don't see me wearing Ray-Bans when Costa makes sunglasses made out of fishing nets now, used recycled fishing nets. You don't see me Nikes because Adidas makes shoes made out of ocean plastic now. And we have to support brands, Patagonia, the things that they've been doing. So it's when I look at a kid with a Calvin Klein shirt, I look at him and I say, what's Calvin Klein ever done for me and my planet? Versus you have Costa out here offering third world countries 10 times the money for ghost nets than to pull boats. So these tugboat captains on their way to get a boat stop when they see a net, pick it up, and they take that to shore instead because Costa made it worth money. So now the cool kids with $250 sunglasses are eco warriors. And now the eco warriors want to be cool kids. Simply by shifting consciousness in our business models, we can do this. We can actually make money doing this. Eco landscaping alone could be a banging economy for Florida.
Right.
I hear Home Depot giving away credit cards like free kittens in a Walmart parking lot. They went in on that action. It's good business.
And what you're describing, I referred early on about, I think this is all, if we don't do something about it, it's going to lead to an economic red tide across the state. Certainly here in Southwest Florida, where all this happened this year. I mean, the tourism industry was devastated. Shops were shutting down. Motels were shutting down. There's no fish charters going out. I mean, it was just devastating. A lot of people are having to just change their lifestyle, their lives, their careers because of this. And you talk about apathy being the enemy. If there is a good thing out of all this, is that you can't ignore a porpoise rolling up on the beach. You can't ignore the fact that you don't have a job right now.
Yep, exactly.
And another people get hit. We get some conscious around this. So let me ask you this, Garrett. And this is of course, I'm imagining a pretty broad answer here. So you define the problem around, it's a nutrient problem in our water, nitrates and phosphates in our water. There's a number of sources. There's the mining, there's the septic tanks, there's the runoff from our landscaping. So, and it's not just Florida. We got it coming down the Mississippi River into the Gulf. So where does the solution begin, and what does an individual do? So I know that's the $1 jillion question here. How can you address that?
Well, the $60 million question is how to fix the issue right here at home at a widespread scale. That would be by showing the world how we just fixed Lake Okeechobee. I'd only need about $60 million to do so. And when you think about $98 million Veterans Parade in Washington being proposed, $60 million to fix the ocean's not that big of a deal, is it? So I would use duckweed permaculture implementation. Now, duckweed, somebody probably listening to this podcast just said, you mean that weed that was there before the algae, before we started spraying it with glyphosate? Yeah, you just answered your own question. Instead of spraying all these aquatic weeds to kill them, that's what was there before the algae. So we got the bright idea to try to make lakes look like golf course ponds. We don't want to see anything. We want to just see the fish. Well, the very duckweed that we've been killing is the answer. FWC in our state, they declare duckweed as invasive. However, I laugh at that because there are 7 native species to the North American continent of duckweed, 3 of which are found in Florida, native. So how is a native species invasive? It's not invasive. We are. Our pollution is invasive. So when we fertilize our lakes and then complain about duckweed taking it over, that's the same as complaining about fertilizing your pepper plant and complaining about picking too many peppers off of it. So we could use the same concept. Now, we've polluted too much. If we just release duckweed on Lake Okeechobee, it will cover the whole lake and do as much damage as it would good. But duckweed takes the nitrates and phosphates out of the water naturally. It's a magical little plant. In fact, I want to use floating greenhouses. That's why I need $60 million for the materials and the skilled labor to pull it off. Now, by using floating greenhouses, we could control the CO2. I could get the duckweed mats to actually double in mass every 24 hours. Now, the floating greenhouses would also keep this duckweed contained. And when people talk about building a reservoir, in reality, let's get real, guys. That reservoir wouldn't be built for another 10 years. And there's many ways to pee in a cup and dilute it with water, but you ain't going to catch me drinking it. And that's just a little bit of common sense. So we need to implement something now because we don't have 10 more years. We don't have 5 more years. When this comes back in the summer, when the rainy season comes back, and it hasn't even gone away. I mean, when it comes back with a vengeance, it's going to be even worse than it was last year. This last year, there are some more animals to die. That's the saddest part. We are losing generations of fish. Generations. Now, if we implement something like duckweed, it could be a fix, $60 million, and in a little as a year, could be shown significant fixes there. Now, duckweed also takes a lot of that CO2, so we could be doing that outdoors as far as not in a greenhouse setting in other places to help lower global warming. That would lower ocean acidification, thus increase coral restoration. But also, what do we do with the duckweed? Well, all those nitrates and phosphates are in there. We can use it as organic fertilizer and be able to have something to use other than Mosaic's phosphate fertilizer. Also, cattle can eat this. Now, duckweed has 5 times the amount of alcohol as sugar. 10 times the amount of vegetable oil as soybeans. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that it's full of protein. Without even mentioning protein, I've already exposed the fact that duckweed is a cash crop. It is. Now, you mentioned protein. Now we can feed cattle with it as well. Now, what did we just do by feeding cattle? We just lowered the agricultural pressure on land acreage of livestock versus humans. So now it's not so bad to eat cows anymore. In fact, when we implement a little bit of macroalgae like kelp in the cattle diets, we're seeing methane reduction up to 98 to 99%. When cow farts produce more methane than cars and airplanes, and we may theoretically be able to take airplanes and cars off the face of the earth without the inconvenience of doing so. So by talking about science and understanding just a little bit of common sense, scientists aren't against business. I'm not trying to get everybody to just bring back the buffalo from the dead and start living in teepees again. It's just a simple shift. We've been driving ourselves so hard, so fast, that we just now realized we've been doing things in a wrong way. We're driving ourselves straight off of a cliff. I do not support the idea that by 2050 coral reefs will become extinct, because I'm not going anywhere. And when I explain to people that on that year, if that happens, I will have to tell you that will be the day that I explain that you've created your own extinction and there's no turning back. 70% of the oxygen that we breathe here on Earth comes from that ocean. Most of the carbon sequestering, it controls our climate, our weather, You take coral reefs away from that picture, that's 25%. We like to eat tuna, but tuna likes to eat too. What's it supposed to eat? Common sense. You cannot take a quarter out of a circle and still explain to me that you have a circle. It will be a broken circle that will crash exponentially.
So let's talk about this, Garrett. And you've defined the problem even bigger than what we see right now with regards to porpoises and sea turtles on the beach. And so you're the CEO of Eco Preservation Project. Talk about the Eco Preservation Project. And this is a new organization you started. And talk about that and how people can support what you're doing and contribute to what you're doing, just like I'm doing.
Absolutely. It's pretty cool because, I've always heard of grassroots organizations, but, when I read about them, they weren't very grassroots at all, because it's planned and, and they did this and that and that. It's not grassroots growth, but this truly was a grassroots organization as far as I didn't ask for this. I didn't plan for this. I was working as a scientist in the Keys. However, I quit the job and moved out of the Keys to become the CEO of my own organization because it was such a demand. I've had an active, I think we have 24,000 people that's already become members. And it's only a few months old. So it's pretty big and pretty powerful just because people like common sense. People like it when somebody that knows what they're talking about can explain it to them. And it's not just somebody that's got a Facebook degree. You're talking about an algae scientist or during an algae problem. People find comfort from that. A lot of times they hear exactly what they were already thinking, but to them, they're just thinking it. They don't know. So when they hear it from Captain Planet, they have a little bit of hope as far as, okay, we're all on the same page. It's going to be okay. Ways that you can support: get on Facebook and join the Eco Preservation Project. Start clicking those share buttons on some of those videos. My slogan's always been knowledge is power. But power, when it goes unshared, we call that greed. And that's how we got to this problem to begin with. It's about protecting what you love, but I truly don't think that we have a problem protecting what we love. I truly don't think we have a money problem in Florida. In fact, I see money everywhere. People know how to protect what they love. Point is, we forgot how to love. We fell out of love with nature here. The number one complaint I see at resorts is not enough tropical landscaping. That's because of 2 decades of selling a half-price trip to Fiji. If somebody wants to go to the tropics, save up and go to Fiji. If you want to come down, check out the coral reefs, the mangroves, the Everglades, the seagrass. Come on down where Captain Planet's making Florida natural again. Check out that Eco Preservation Project and think about your wallet. Think about those dollars that you spend and how even if you're a vegan, if you don't spend those dollars right, they can be just as much savage as what you used to be. When you're supporting brands like Doritos who get their fertilizer from Mosaic, then you're just as much a part of Mosaic as somebody getting paid off by Mosaic. And I'm really tired of when you ask people to raise their hand and you ask what Mosaic is. And you have one person raise their hand and tell you it's artwork. No, that's that company destroying our land. And you need to get informed. Talk about donating, but if you hear me, I don't talk about it too much because it's really about knowledge. If I do a good enough job, then I think people would want to support this nonprofit. I spent 2 days at a high school up here in Treasure Coast. That's what this is all about. I go to schools and I talk just like this to the kids. So I get these kids aware. I go to these schools on my own dime, on my own time, on my own gas, but this comes from the support of everyone that feels a need to protect what they love and fall in love with it again. Our daughters and our sons won't be able to fish unless we do something. We keep thinking about the next 7 years and we stop thinking about the next 7 generations. So what you can do for the Eco Preservation Project is take a deep look inside yourself and ask yourself if you truly know what it means to be a responsible human being. And if you've earned the right to wear that crown that our species sees fit to put on our head. What is it to be human? Are we treating our neighbors right? Are we treating our women right? Are we treating ourselves right? We treat the earth like we treat ourselves, really complicit. So I think it's about loving ourselves, loving each other, and getting back to loving Big Mama, what I call Mother Earth. Yeah, donations are also awesome. You can write checks to the Eco Preservation Project. We're a legitimate nonprofit. You can check us out on SunBiz. We've also got a GoFundMe page. It's also pinned to the top of the Facebook page. So that's always available to donate to. So thank you to everybody that does donate and make this possible for me. It's definitely the most important thing in my life, is just raising awareness, making a little bit of sense to people.
And I want to encourage everyone to do that. I'm doing it. As soon as I heard about what Garrett was doing and the common sense approach that he has to it, backed by the science, I think that's unique voice that has been lacking as I've been trying to understand this for the last several months. And so there's a Facebook page, the Eco Preservation Project. This is Garrett Stuart, but it's under Eco Preservation Project. And the GoFundMe page, is that on the Facebook page or is that on the website, Garrett?
That's on the Facebook page. Our website is currently under construction right now. Blue Marketing, Blue Wave Marketing is helping me with our website. So they're doing some awesome pro bono stuff too for us. So in 3 weeks, we should have our new website launched where you can just be able to click a donate button and it won't even go through GoFundMe kind of thing. Some people are a little bit wary of GoFundMe and wary of just electronical, money being swapped. And for those kind of people, feel free to get on that Facebook where it does give my P.O. box. I'd say it right now if I remembered it, but I travel around. But yeah, people all the time mail me cash, gas cards, mail me checks, different things like that. Just, usually it's our elders, that just aren't as comfortable as just putting their number in their their credit card number in their cell phone and hoping Captain Planet gets what they sent. Yeah, that GoFundMe does go directly to our company card that I have access to. So that's how I get around. That's how I eat. That's how I get gas. When you do have to get some hotels every now and then when I can't find people to host me. But there's all kinds of ways to donate. For example, if you find out that I'm in your neck of the woods, offer me a room to stay in. Maybe you've got a spare bedroom or something where I could crash and not have to waste $100 on a hotel, because every little bit counts like that. And I never, ever, ever stay at a hotel unless I absolutely have to. I'll drive hours longer just to crash at somebody's house, because it also gives me a chance to get personal with somebody that's been waiting to meet me. So it's kind of neat getting to be a superhero to people. Kids ask me every day if I'm Poseidon.
Well, everyone,
and they give me a look like they're serious. And a third grader whispered to you, "Are you Poseidon?" Like, I know who you are.
and so as Garrett explained, this is not just a Florida problem. This is certainly a American problem and a worldwide problem with regards to what we're doing to the waters. And I didn't realize most of what he just learned today with regards to the impact on the reefs, but I can see it all happening because I've seen it firsthand here in my own backyard. So everyone, just put up something, help Garrett out here, because he is the voice of reason out there for a lot of people not even aware of this. So go ahead, Garrett. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Thanks. No, it's just people just really need to stop pointing fingers, and that's what either makes you love me or dislike me, because I don't give you anyone to blame but yourself. Because people want to just blame Big Sugar or something like that. But, I've got an agricultural background, and I've looked at the numbers, guys, and sugar farming is doing 70% better than it was 20 years ago environmentally. And hardly any back pumping goes back into Lake Okeechobee. So this is all of us. I really see this as honestly more to do with our landscaping than it really does with sugar. It has a lot to do with the way we mine our fertilizers. So Kansas, for example, we stopped strip mining the land almost 2 generations ago because we realized how bad it was for the environment. And Florida is the environment. Like, that's how we make money. People fly here to be in our environment. We're killing it, acting like they're going to still want to stay in our hotel or our rental house while they're hiding from the reek of death and red tide. Right. So it's about all of us understanding if we talk together and we work together with ideas, we can do this. I don't need politicians when I have everyone in Florida. How many politicians are there versus how many people are there in the state of Florida? In America, we've got 600 politicians or something. How many millions of people? I'm always going to stock my thought on the sweat of American backs, instead of just relying completely on our government. We need to remember we are our government. We voted those people in there. Maybe we should take a more conscious thought about how we vote. Start voting for people that believe in climate change.
Well, it's certainly become a political hot potato now for a lot of politicians that are running right now.
Yep.
We've seen, and so it is, if there was anything good from this last summer, Garrett, in my opinion, is that it was so bad. It did, you can't get around the fact that your business, you're out of business. You can't get around that fact for people in Southwest Florida. And that creates, they want change. Now, part of what you're sharing is
people are upset.
It's got to start in your own backyard too. You got to,
we will have government help. I promise you that. Just look at us. If they don't, they will have a full-blown revolution on their hands.
I agree.
Nobody wants a resistance of Florida, But hey,
well, when it affects our number one revenue source,
here to chill out. We're getting upset. So it's in the government's best interest to work with scientists that are making some common sense. The problem is you don't talk to scientists on the phone because scientists aren't known to be very good storytellers. But I'm a very good storyteller, and I'm a better storyteller than I am a scientist. That's why I figured I'd just keep an education. Somebody else can put on a lab coat when you have me to try to explain what's going on in those labs, what's going on in our nature. And we have to make common sense. When people have enough knowledge and information to make a decision about something, they can make a logical, unbiased decision instead of just deciding what they're told to decide, like we've been doing for the last 100 years.
Right. Well, everyone, I'm going to put on the show notes but Facebook, it's Echo Preservation Project. You'll find me there. And do make a point, contribute, 10 or 20 bucks if nothing else. Echo, take a position in this, just supporting the man is out there on a grassroots mission. He left his job to do this. It just happened over the last few months, and he has a common sense approach, but he has the science behind it, which is a very, very unique combination. We'll put all this on the show notes. Garrett, I tell you, I am so appreciative of what you're doing, the personal sacrifice you're making, but I obviously see your passion behind it. And I'm going to, obviously be donating as well, but also want to contribute and find other ways to help you, what you're doing and getting the awareness out there for pretty selfish reasons. I want to be around a little bit longer on this planet.
Oh, exactly. It's nothing wrong with being concerned with yourself and your family. People call that selfish. I call that evolution. It's called survival of the fittest, my friend. But if all of us strong get together, and like you said, donate. Everybody's got $30 to spend a month. Think about a monthly donation. So if I was Mary Poppins, I'd tell you, $1 a day keeps the pollution away.
There you go.
Right.
There you go. So he's out there fighting for us, and everyone, I want to encourage you to go, do a monthly donation. That's even better. Make it a residual, recurring for this grassroots organization he has going. All right, Garrett, any final thoughts? This has been fabulous. Any final thoughts that you want to share with everyone who's listening to this?
Now, just remember, guys, knowledge is power. But power, when it's not shared, is culture. That's how we got here in the first place, guys. So just remember, knowledge is power. Share it. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We use them in that ratio. We're going to be just fine.
Very good. There you guys have it. Mr. Garrett Stuart, Echo Preservation Project. Garrett, thank you so much for everything you're doing and for spending time with us today.
You're so welcome, buddy. Thank you for having me,
All right.
brother. I really appreciate it.
No, this has been fabulous. All right, everyone. So this is Lance Edwards with Greenlight REI. Go to the show notes. Go to greenlightreinvesting.com, greenlightreinvesting.com. We'll have the show notes from this where you can read about it and have the resources where you can contribute to the Echo Preservation Project. Until the next session, take care, everyone. Goodbye.
You've been listening to The Expert with Lance Edwards. Let us now blatantly and shamelessly bribe you toward creating your own real estate lifestyle by offering you a whole bunch of free stuff. Go to greenlightreinvesting.com and get you some free stuff and this session's show notes.